having conversation today about exploring ableism with the hope that we would be able to increase accessibility for all members at our institution. That includes students, as well as faculty, staff, administrators, and individuals that we have the privilege of doing life with, both in our professional lives and in our personal lives. This event is in partnership with the MCCA Digital Accessibility Affinity Group, as well as our guest presenters today with Disability Network of Southwest Michigan. I am soon going to get off of stage. I just had a few remarks that I wanted to share with you all before we dive into today's content related to the Digital Accessibility Affinity Group. For those who are interested in joining this affinity group, I wanted to give you just some background or a high-level overview of what this group is about. And if you are a person who is leading digital accessibility efforts at your institution and would benefit from receiving some camaraderie, support, encouragement, and ideas as you navigate challenges at your institution, this affinity group may be a great fit for you. The goal of the group is to collaborate with other digital accessibility leaders to support one another, collaborate, and cross-share best practices across campuses. We also have opportunities for colleges to also share their efforts in by way of presentation or just openly sharing what's been working at your institution that may be of benefit to other colleagues across the state. So if that is of interest to you, we would welcome you to attend the coming meetings that we have. I'll share that the meeting schedule in a moment. So here we have our next steps of how you can partner. We have today's webinar, Exploring Ableism, and then on November 7th, we will also be joined again through or with the Disability Network of Southwest Michigan in our conversation to explore ways we can create accessible content. Every meeting thereafter, we will have our Digital Accessibility Affinity Group meetings. The meeting I'd like to highlight on this list is March 5th from 3 to 4 p.m. We will be joined by the Michigan's Office of High-Speed Internet and Access. They will be sharing Michigan's resources that are available through the state of Michigan that would support the close of the digital divide, as well as sharing Michigan's state strategy to close digital gaps in our state. And then if you want to stay in the know about things that are happening or things that are coming up, I welcome you to subscribe to our mailing list. On the screen, there's an icon that you can use if you have a mobile device that allows you to pull up your camera and point it towards the image on the screen. It will take you out to a link where you can subscribe. If you don't have access to this, that is quite okay. I will be emailing it out as well after today's convening. And if I don't have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing so that we can welcome Miranda to talk about how we can explore our ableism to increase accessible access to all.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us here again today. My name is Miranda Grunwell. I use the pronouns she and her. I am the program manager for community education here at Disability Network Southwest Michigan. I've been with the agency now for 15 years in a variety of different roles. And so currently I do our presentations in our community in person and virtually. And ableism was actually one of our first presentations that we developed about 15 years ago. So it's super excited to be here. We will describe things today ourselves and on the slide just for accessibility. So I describe myself as a white female with long brown curly hair wearing glasses. And then helping me out today is Tyler. So I'm going to let Tyler do a quick intro as well.
Thank you, Miranda, and hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Urias, and I am the Community Education and Digital Liaison here at Disability Network Southwest Michigan. I've worked with the agency for 2.5 years. My pronouns are he, him, his, and as a brief visual description of myself, I am a white male with blonde hair, blue eyes. Very excited to be here with you all this afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tyler. I did provide ahead of time a copy of the PowerPoint and handouts. If you didn't get them, that is okay. Tyler will be putting stuff in the chat today along the way. Excuse me, you can also reach out to any of us and we'll get you that information as well. But we want to make sure you have the information. You didn't need to read anything ahead of time. That wasn't any homework for this, but we like to have everybody have access to the materials just in case any for accessibility or needs that they might have ahead of time. I'm going to do a quick screen share so everybody can see my PowerPoint. So you should be seeing the first slide now, has our logo on it in the top left corner. This is Disability Network Southwest Michigan. I am out of our Kalamazoo office, but we do serve kind of like the corner of Michigan. We cover 8 counties. So we have a big service area, and now with Zoom, I can go anywhere, including we've been international now too, and crossed all of our states. So it's been pretty fun in this virtual space. We call this presentation our intro to ableism. Everything you think you know about disability is probably wrong. And I have probablys in a quote there. I acknowledge that all of us here today know something about disability. Whether we have a disability, we work with students with disabilities, friends, family members, current jobs, past jobs, all of those things, and just the world that we live in. We all learn about disability. And some of that information is correct. Some of it used to be correct. Some of it never was. And for some, I'm really just going to challenge some of these thoughts and perspectives that you think you have about disability and challenge them today. So I ask that you be on this journey with us today. Ableism is something that we have all been taught and we've learned over a long period of time. And so it's not something we're going to get to check off our box today. I know a lot of times people do that. Like, well, I'm not ableist anymore. I hung out with Miranda and Tyler. Check. That's not how it works. It's a journey. It's a process, and we always keep learning. Tyler and I have probably done hundreds. I've probably done thousands of these presentations now. I'm still ableist too. It is always a constant journey of unlearning and growing and being better than what we were. And so I just ask that you all be open-minded with us today and be part of this journey. Also on this slide is our contact information. So if we can be of any help after today, please reach out to us. We're very happy to keep answering questions, be part of conversations, and just be a resource or for any future presentations that you might need. We start all of our presentations with the definition of what a disability is. And we do this because we know that we all have an idea of what a disability is. And again, it comes from different things, just what we know in our backgrounds and our information. And so we use the definition from the Americans with Disabilities Act, which comes from Title I of the ADA, and that was passed in July of 1990. And it says that a person has a disability if they have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And so there is not a list of disabilities. A lot of times people will think that they'll call us or ask, be like, oh, I'm diabetic, does that count? I have depression, does that count? And so it depends on if it affects a major life activity. And so it could be even bodily functions. And it comes down to truly what affects your major life. It's also, you can have a disability and not get a benefit. Sometimes people will ask me that, well, you know, I don't have a disability because I don't receive Social Security, or I don't have any sort of government assistance, state or federal. And that's not what determines if you have a disability. It's this definition here. Someone like myself, I have a learning disability and basic reading and written expression. And so for me, that means I read and write at a 5th grade level with no assistance. I don't receive any services from the government. I receive special education K through 12, accommodations in college, and accommodations in my workplace. My reading and writing is an everyday function. And so that's what makes me have a disability, not any government program or service that I receive. I'm not going to go into detail today, but I do want to acknowledge that the ADA does have protection for people who are regarded as having disability or a record. And where we really see that is in the employment setting. But I do want to acknowledge those pieces today. The image on this slide is 10 young adults with disabilities smiling for the camera on the first day of work. And some of you might be looking at this photo now and being like, well, I don't see any disabilities in here. And that's because 80% of all disabilities are non-apparent, or some people would call them hidden, meaning that you wouldn't know that a person has a disability just by looking at them. Most of the time, what we do see is a person's technology and not that disability itself. So keep in mind when we talk about disability today, we're talking about all disabilities. So when you can see, you can't see, and all of them in between. Disability is extremely unique and different to each person, just like all of us are unique and different. Any questions for me on this definition before I get us started?
This is Tyler.
There we go.
I do just want to really quick, we did figure out that the Zoom is not allowing us to put in handouts at the moment. So if you do not have them readily available, I am able to send them to you. So if you want to send me an email, I can certainly send them handouts to you. If you did not get them ahead of time, or Precious may have another method for getting them. But I just wanted to state that at present, I cannot drop them into the chat.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know that, Tyler. Yeah, and we can get them, Precious or I, or email us. We'll make sure you get it. Okay, I didn't hear any other questions, so I'm gonna go to our next slide. So on here, the text on this slide says, the cultural message is that it's really not okay to be a person with a disability, and people with disabilities know it. And for some people are like, well, this is kind of harsh, or it's not true. And I can tell you, as a person that has lived with a disability her whole life, it is the message that I do receive. Now, nobody has ever come up to me and ever said, Miranda, it sucks to be you. But it has been said my whole life, and other things and phrases that have been said to me and others that I know that has a disability. Things like, after when I talk about my disability, you poor thing, or keep trying, you'll get over it. Well, you should grow out of that, right? Well, at least you look normal, but you're so smart. Or they'll start treating me differently. After I disclose my disability and ask for assistance, then they'll start treating me like I'm two. I did that this morning. I was in a community training where there was no way for me to disclose I was going to need an accommodation, and we needed to do an activity. And so that needed some reading. And so I turned to the person next to me and had said, hey, would you mind working with me and reading this part of the first part of the assignment? I said, I have a learning disability and I can't read it. And he turned to me and said, oh, you precious little darling, you're just God's gift. And I was like, okay, thanks. Just wanted this first little paragraph read, but thank you. And then just kept talking to me in this little cute angelic voice. But when he turned to talk to the other person, talked in a very what I would call his normal voice, because that's what I heard the rest of our 4-hour training together, a typical voice. But whenever he talked to me, he used that little squeaky, cute voice as I refer to it, because I asked for that assistance. And we did put a link to those handouts in there, in the chat for you too. And so again, that taught me again this morning. He definitely was thinking, I don't know what, but I got what I needed and I was grateful for that. But he definitely again taught me that it wasn't okay to be me, or he didn't view me as a peer like he did everybody else, because he had to talk in this little cute squeaky voice to me. And these messages, it's not our fault. It's things that we have been taught our whole life. We have been taught that it's not okay to have a disability. And so we then reflect that on others. And it's not true. There's nothing wrong with having a disability. Disability is diversity. There's disability pride, there's disability history, and there's disability culture. And having a disability is a characteristic that some people have and some people don't. and that's okay. I also, if we think about the television and shows and the media and things that we watch and see, the marketing that is done, we don't show a lot of times people with disabilities in that positive way. It's not the rich CEO that is the lead character. We're the sidekick, we're the brother, we're the sister, but we're not that lead actor. And so again, we don't see that representation like we need to see. And we also don't learn about disability. When we really think about when we think about history and what we learned, if you can do with the reactions, I think reactions are a choice. Yep. So if you want to do a reaction, either a thumbs up, thumbs down, how many of you remember learning about disability history at some point in time, or you teach disability history? Thumbs up, yep. Thumbs down, nope. You can put yes or no in the chat.
You see a few thumbs ups popping up.
Okay, good. This is not my average group, so I like it. Most of the time I get a whole bunch of thumbs down, so.
We do in the chat also have a few no's as well.
Perfect. So again, the fact that I had more than one person with a thumbs up, then you guys are all gonna be my above average group.
This is Tyler. Also in the chat, Kari wrote, no, not until I started working in disability services.
Perfect, that's fair. Yeah, and I think that's true. Most people, until either our personal lives or professional lives come into this world of disability, we don't tend to learn about it. It's not in our mainstream education system. It's not usually the things that we think about. Our libraries might have a book or two, but they're not the ones on display. They're not massively advertised. And so it's not our fault that we don't know about disability as much as we should. It's just not part of that mainstream culture.
Also in the chat, Rachel wrote, I started my learning on my own, family members with various ones, but more recently training has been provided after the government stepped in.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's sometimes what happens, that personal connection or a requirement too happens. And so when I give usually our ableism presentation in full is 3 hours. And so today I'm just doing the intro part of it. So I'm not going to go ton into history, but I do need to first kind of set the ground before we go into what ableism is. You have to understand the history behind a group before you can really understand that discrimination. And so it's important to know that the independent living movement is part of the civil rights movement. When people of color and women were fighting for equality, people with disabilities were there too. We were also being discriminated against because of a characteristic that we did or did not have. We were being told, no, you can't go to school here. I mean, we were left out of our education system. K through 12, we had separate schools, or we didn't get to go to school at all. We were locked away in institutions. We didn't get jobs. You know, we weren't teachers and administrators and principals and all of those things, or working in colleges as professors. We were things that we were taken care of as how we were viewed. We didn't have the right to vote. We also had to fight for our right to vote. And that took a long time to get. And so when the civil rights was taking place in the 60s and 70s, people with disabilities were like, you know what? Hey, us too. We were looking at our fellow community members and saying, we're sick of being discriminated against too. And so when they were writing the Civil Rights Act that was passed in 1964, we wanted to be a part of that. However, we were told no by the government. We were told that it would make us less competitive in the world market, and so they could not include us. And so in 1964, even though we were part of those demonstrations and asking to be part of it, we were told no, and we weren't. We had to wait until July of 1990 to get our civil rights passed, the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's not that long ago at all. It's within my lifetime. Thankfully, I don't remember life before the ADA. And some of us may or may not, but it wasn't something that the government gave us because they thought it was the right thing to do. We got our civil rights because a group of people fought and said, the time is now.
And also in the chat, Joseph wrote, "Go Judy Human."
Exactly. Yes. Judy Human. If you are looking for an educational opportunity, look up Judy Human. She has done amazing work in her lifetime, was part of lots of things. I can't go into it. I love disability history. I could talk hours and days on that. We did lose her here in March. So way too soon. We still had way too much to learn and work to do with Judy. But it definitely is one of our leading activists in the disability community. You can also watch Crip Camp if you haven't. That's on Netflix and YouTube. Do not watch it in front of small children. There will be some conversations that are not age appropriate, but amazing movie, and you can learn more about Judy if you're saying, who is Judy? So just remember, it's important to know that part of the discrimination or ableism that we have and experience is still rooted in this idea that we are not seen as equals historically like other groups as well. And the image on this slide are 2 black and white photos back from the protest. And after this slide, I will stop for some questions. And so because we don't know this history, we don't know the culture, and the information is hasn't been part of our mainstream and our growing up, we all have assumptions that lead, and these assumptions are things that we have been taught and lead to the ableism that we experience or do to others. So assumptions, it's things like having a disability is bad and sad, and overcoming a disability is admirable. There are parts of a disability that it's good to, figure out tips and techniques to improve daily life and quality of life, but we all do that regardless of disability. We're all trying to better ourselves and our families and our communities, and disability is no different. Having a disability isn't necessarily bad or sad. There are some days that are worse than others, just like anybody else. I know many people without a disability, and they have good days and bad days. And guess what? So do people with disabilities. But there shouldn't be this assumption that because I have a disability, I'm living every day to overcome it and to be better than it. Nobody's ever asked me to do that as being I'm a woman, but nobody's ever praised me for overcoming my womanness. So why do we have to do that for a disability? And I saw, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like Joseph posted a link to a TED Talk. It
Looks
says,
like it's
Stella Young, I am not your inspiration. Yep, it is the inspiration porn talk.
Yeah, I don't have that in today's, but in my full 3-hour presentation, we do a whole section with Stella Young and inspiration porn. But for today, I didn't include that. And so it's important to remember that we're not all out there trying to overcome. Most of the time, we're just trying to live our life and to have access to basic needs and necessities in our communities like everybody else. Another assumption that we hear a lot is doctors and professionals should do whatever they can to make us be normal as possible. Now, nothing against doctors or professionals. I've benefited greatly. I've had doctors save my life, and I'm very grateful for them. However, it's not my goal in life to be normal. My goal in life is to have a happy, successful life, as I'm sure most of us do have those same ideas. Now, doctors and professionals can provide some great information and helpfulness, but can anybody here thumbs up if you follow your doctor's orders perfect 100% of the time? Anybody? Everything your doctor says, you're getting the right amount of sleep, water, exercise.
This is Tyler. I'm not seeing any thumbs. And in the chat, Joseph wrote, still need to do those at labs.
Me too.
And then Precious also wrote, I wouldn't say 100%.
Exactly. We all take our doctors and professionals' information and apply what we want, can, or have to. But people with disabilities are expected to. Things are taken away if we don't. I've seen it with even within my own family members that will be like, oh, well, the doctor says you can't have junk food, and they take all junk food away. It's controlled. If you don't have access to get in your car and drive to the grocery store or buy your own groceries, then how are you going to have access to that junk food? There are some people with disabilities that have very little say in that, and they are forced to do things.
There were a couple more chats as well. In the chat, Kari wrote most of the time, not 100%. And Rachel also put a thumbs down.
Exactly. We don't. None of us do. And so it's just really important to remember that we're not all of us, including people with disabilities, want to do that. There's been a lot of stuff lately around disability and parenting and what is the perfect parent and how are you the best parent. And having a disability means, well, you wouldn't be a parent. There's the thoughts that you could pass your disability along to your child. You couldn't provide for your child or take care of your child because of your disability. And that's not true. And the statistics even goes into that. There's evidence to support that. Just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you're not going to be a good parent. There's people without disabilities that are not good parents. So people with disabilities might not be a good parent too, but it has nothing to do always with a disability. Especially nowadays, there's so much technology available to help in a community to help you navigate those things. And so it shouldn't be this assumption that you couldn't be a parent and have a disability. And if a child is born with a disability, who better to help raise them than another person with a disability? And so challenging these assumptions that we have. The image on this slide, there's two. One is of a gentleman sitting in a wheelchair giving the thumbs up, and a lady standing behind him with a sonogram. Her hand is on her forehead with a note that says, "It still works," referring to that parent. And then the last one is challenging that assumptions about professionals. It is a doctor sitting in a power chair in what looks like maybe an ER room.
This is Tyler. In the chat, Rachel wrote, I also commonly ask people what is normal anyway, because what is normal to me may not be normal to anyone else. So that should be remembered also.
Yep. Thank you for that, Rachel. Yeah, definitely. Normal, I always say it's relative. It's to one person's experience in life and goals. Some people want to grow up and be a rock star. I don't. I already am a rock star. You don't want me to have a microphone though. My theory in life is, since I can't sing loud and off key. Anybody, any other thoughts or questions for me before I define what ableism is? If we had sound effects, there'd be a drum roll. I'm loving the conversation in here.
This is Tyler. Precious did put an icon of a little drum roll, actually.
That's awesome. There we go, Tyler. Since we don't have sound effects, we can do images.
There we go.
Love it. Perfect. Okay. So let me define what ableism is. We define ableism as the systematic oppression, mistreatment, and marginalization of people with disabilities. To keep it simple, it's discrimination in favor of the non-disabled person. We live in a world that is designed and developed by and for people without disabilities. Usually disability, when it's thought of, it's that afterthought. And so we're going to break it down into some levels today. And so that way we can think about what ableism is at different levels. The image on this slide is of a blue banner with blue writing, and it says, "Nothing about us without us." This is the rallying cry from the disability community, because far too often it's people without disabilities making decisions for us and about us, and it shouldn't be. So the first level that we're going to look at is personal. This consists of values, beliefs, and feelings. So this is what we think, feel, and believe. A common one is that people with disabilities should be feared, pitied, or taken care of. And that people with disabilities have a poor quality of life. So these, again, are things that you can think of and feel. A common example that we see here is people will say, especially to people with non-apparent disabilities, "You don't look sick." And so then we'll deny us access to programs and services or accommodations because we don't look a certain way. We have this belief or value or feeling that people with disabilities look or act a certain way. I had somebody tell me once, well, people with disabilities, they smell a certain way. I've met thousands of people, hundreds of people with disabilities, and none of them smell anything. And so people with disabilities, we come in all different shapes, sizes, and abilities, and disabilities change. We have good days and bad days in many things. And so it's very different in each of us. We have this idea sometimes that fear is not necessarily fear of like getting a disability or catching that disability necessarily, but it's that idea that you don't know what to do. It's that awkwardness that you're not sure what to do. Like, I want to be friendly, I want to be helpful. And so that's usually those things. And it's okay. Treat us like everybody else. We'll be okay. There's a lot of pity. People feel bad for us, sorry for us. It comes into the idea that we need to be taken care of. It's like, well, I don't know how I would do this if I had that disability, so let me just do it for you. Let me just be helpful. And I know, especially here in the Midwest, we want to be super helpful because that's what we know to do. But just ask, how can I help you? Stop and listen, and we will all be okay. We don't need to be taken care of. We need help, but we all do from time to time. And so that's that just, how can I help? And then stop and listen. Any questions for me so far or thoughts?
This is Tyler. In the chat, Precious wrote, I had a friend who had a disagreement with someone at the grocery store because she parked in the handicap parking space. When she got out of her car, someone yelled, "You don't look handicapped. You shouldn't park there."
Yeah, this idea, this belief that disability looks a different way. My mom has had that quite a bit. My mom has lung cancer and has had one of her lungs removed. Looking at my mom, she does not look disabled. However, for her to make it from the Meijer parking lot into the grocery shop, and back to her vehicle is not physically possible for her. And so she does use an accessible parking spot. And she has gotten yelled at. She's had things thrown at her because she doesn't look disabled enough. However, if they were to follow her around Meijer's, they would quickly learn that, she stopped 6 times to catch her breath. And it's also none of your business. If people don't have, they should have a sticker and then put it up, or a placard, or however, there's different ways people can have it. They should have them if they do need them. But yeah, or I've known somebody that has borrowed their grandmother's before. Give grandma back her parking pass. You don't, if you need one, reach out, get it. Okay, so the next one is interpersonal. This consists of our actions, behaviors, and language. So this is still, again, us, but now we're putting it out there in the world. So it's not addressing the person with a disability, but the people that are with them. I don't want to talk about snow, but it's coming. We're in Michigan. Sorry, I'm not a fan either. But not removing snow from our sidewalks. Sidewalks is access for many people with disabilities. It's how we get about. Not everybody drives. And so, whether it's someone with a wheelchair needing to access that, or even someone who is blind or low vision has that white cane, it's really hard to navigate with all that snow. And so sidewalks are a form of, movement in our community. So removing that snow this winter, when that has to happen, I know it hurts me to use that example. Or something when somebody says, I don't think of you as disabled. I know that this is meant with great respect. However, you're also then saying you're not seeing a part of me. Disability is okay, and having a disability is just a fact about my life and others that some people have. And so usually when people will say that, well, I just don't think of you as disabled, Miranda, you're just so normal. Again, it's meant as that compliment, but that's not how I take it, because usually the next part of that conversation is you're denying me access to something, or you're denying me my accommodation because you don't think of me in that way. And there's nothing wrong with having a disability. And so we shouldn't take away that person's identity. And with that, another one is don't let your autism define you. It could be any disability, but this is one we hear a lot in the community. Well, I'm not going to let you shouldn't do that. That's letting your autism define you. Well, no, it's okay to have autism or any other disability, and being part of those groups and accessing those resources and programs and services. It's okay if that's what I want. It's not letting it define who I am. It's letting me do what I want to do. And as an individual, that's ultimately what we all want, is to do what we need and want in life. The image on this screen is of a cartoon type drawing. There are two people standing up and one person in the middle between the two of them sitting in a wheelchair. And one person is saying to the other person that's standing, so what are Robin's plans for Christmas? And then Robin, who is sitting in the wheelchair, says, I'm Robin, I'm right here, paralyzed, but my hearing is fine. So remember to always address the person. If they have an interpreter, you would still address the person. The interpreter there is as a tool for communication. They're not there to talk questions. If a person has somebody with them, like I know I did this when I was in college, especially at the beginning during that orientation, my mom came with me. And a lot of people kept asking my mom if she had any questions. Well, guess what? My mom wasn't paying the tuition bill and my mom wasn't coming to college with me. Very few people asked me if I had any questions. And I had lots of questions, but didn't get to answer all of them because everybody kept talking to my mom. We see this also too, especially with somebody with an intellectual disability. They'll look for their parents or a caregiver. I've been asked before, is your caregiver here? No, I'm all here all by myself. My husband doesn't travel with me or go places in that capacity. He's my husband. He doesn't get to make decisions, major life decisions for me. Do we discuss them? Yes, sometimes that's what couples do, but he doesn't get to be my caregiver and make those decisions for me. Anyone, any questions or thoughts here? Okay. So taking it one step deeper, now we're going to go to the organization. And these are some things that you can change, and sometimes you can't with an organization. These consist of organizations, rules, policies, and procedures. You might be able to influence them and you might be able to help change them depending on where you are within that organization. And sometimes you don't have any say except for trying to educate and advocate, and that's okay. But a common one that we see at a lot of places when they're hiring is that you must have a valid Michigan driver's license to work here. Now, is it meant to be a form of discrimination? I don't know, but it is. There's lots of reasons why people can't get a driver's license. It could be because of a disability. It could be because of their disability, they're not able to drive. And so thinking about it, do you really need to drive to do this job? And some people will say, well, they have to get here. Well, there's lots of ways to get to work and get home. They could ride with a coworker. They could take the bus. They could walk. They could ride the bus. They could get a Uber. They could get a Lyft. Like there's lots of ways. And unless if you're concerned about how everybody gets to work, then don't be concerned about how I with a disability gets to work. As long as I'm here on time and I do my job. A Michigan or a valid Michigan ID could very much be needed. You do have to prove you're able to work here. I just got a part-time job and had to pull out my Social Security card and driver's license yesterday to prove I worked here. And so that's part of working, but it doesn't have to be a license. Another common one that we hear, especially in the service field, is you must come to our office to get services. We did it beautifully during the pandemic. We figured out how to do lots of programs and services virtually. And so we really need to keep that for people with disabilities. There's lots of reasons why it could be hard for a person to always get to campus or get to a service. Transportation could be one of them. It could be disabilities. Some disabilities, you have good days and bad days, or you could have flare-ups and things like that, being exposed to certain things, especially during cold and flu season. And so keeping options available for people. The more options people have, usually the better it is. Another one is fragrance-free. Fragrances can cause some, headaches, rashes. For some people, it can cause some breathing problems. And so making sure that if you have if you don't have a fragrance-free policy, trying to implement that, or at least think about those cleaning products. Fragrances can cause lots of different problems for people. And it's a barrier that a lot of people don't think about, is those things that we smell when we're there. And so like here at Disability Network, we have a fragrance-free policy. And we do ask guests that come to our building not to wear fragrances. Do we track what laundry detergent they use? No. But we do want them not coming bathed in, smelling like they're coming from Bath and Body Works. Stuff like that, like lotions. We do have fragrance-free lotion that's available. Our hand sanitizer we have throughout the office, that's all fragrance-free. Just trying to be mindful that some fragrances can be harmful to people. Or having segregated seating or segregated programs. Yes, we all like to sometimes just be with our people, as I call them. I like hanging out with people with disabilities. I'm, those support groups and those very safe places that we all have with people. That's good, but not all the time. Not always should we be segregated. I should be able to attend whatever classes I want, be part of whatever groups and part of communities on campuses, and not always be referred to the disability group. Oh, you have a disability? You should go be with Disability Student Services. You shouldn't be on student council, or you shouldn't be on, whatever. Know that there's times and spaces where we want to be with people within our community, but we also want to be part of our bigger community and just have full access to our community. The image on this slide just says, "Are you awesome? We're hiring." Remembering looking at your hiring practices. If you don't have many people with disabilities that you know of working with you, why? Why aren't we there with you? 1 in 5 Americans have a disability. And so that means more than likely you should have people with disabilities there. And so looking at those hiring practices and asking at the organizational level, why don't we have people here? The next one is cultural. This consists of our values that we define as a culture. So again, taking it one step deeper, our cultural values on what we define as a culture as beauty, truth, right, and normal. Some examples of this is we place value on walking over wheeling, or that it's even better. And we see this because when we build stuff, we build steps, right? We just assume this as a value that people are going to walk up these steps. We could just build everything with ramps. Ramps work for everyone. So why don't we just build everything with ramps? Or that it's better to drive than be a pedestrian. Again, if we think about snow removal, we spend thousands of dollars as taxpayers on removing snow from our roads because that's our priority. Why don't we use some of those same money to remove snow from our sidewalks too, and just have that be a city service? We can do it. I grew up in a small town here in Schoolcraft, Michigan. And that is actually something that the city does. If you live within the village, they plow your sidewalks for you. It's part of your city taxes, because they value accessibility for everybody. And so when roads are taken care of, sidewalks are taken care of. and you don't have to take care of that yourself as a homeowner. And so thinking about that, where do we place our money and our values? Or a culture that there's a right way to fit in. We have all probably been told at some point in time to act a certain way or do something a certain way to fit in, or we have felt those societal pressures to do something to fit in. Why? Why do we have to? In a world where everybody's trying to be the same, stand out and be you, be beautiful. Also, this idea that oral speech is the best form of communication. We spend a lot of time, energy, effort, and money trying to get kids to communicate and by talking, because that's what we value. Why can't we spend some of that same money and teach ASL and alternative forms of communication, picture boards, talking boards, keyboards, talking software? There's so much technology that's available. Why don't we teach that more for students that need that in people? Why do we always force speech first? Again, culturally, that's what we've been taught that is best. Also, this belief that people with visible disabilities are not beautiful. And the image on here is a great example. I just asked Google for a picture of beautiful people, and this is one of the very first images that came up. It is a bunch of little splits of photos of people. They're all light-skinned, white, blonde hair, blue eyes, beautiful makeup, not a flaw in there, long hair, young, no wrinkles, and none of them look like they have a disability. This idea of a society in our culture is what beautiful is. People with disabilities, we're beautiful too. We're all beautiful. And we all have the right to be regarded in that way. And so then this all leads to internalized ableism. Internalized ableism occurs when a person with a disability believes that they're less worthy due to their disability. So this is taking in all of these forms of ableism that we experience at different levels, different days, some days all of them, some days not. And we internalize these things and we start thinking that we are less than. So this is our response to the ableism we experience. Things that people have said is like, I feel like a burden because I have to ask for help more than others. Or I can't work because my teachers and parents say that I can't. Again, if you've been told your whole life you can't do something, then you're going to believe that. Or if I could just talk normal, maybe I could get a job. And this was from a customer of ours who was a licensed master social worker with 10 years of experience, looking to do a career change, and nobody would hire him because his cerebral palsy affected his speech. He was accused of showing up to interviews drunk a few times, and he wasn't. He's not a person who drinks. And so he always talks about how he just wishes he sounded and talked normal so people would take him seriously. He's internalized this ableism that he has faced his whole life to not value him. And so thinking about those things and then challenging them. A lot of times people with disabilities, we see this by saying, I'm sorry. The image on here is of a sticky note and it says, I'm sorry. And so you'll hear this a lot with people with disabilities. I'm sorry. Can you help me? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did that this morning in that training when I needed assistance. I turned to the person next to me and I started the conversation with, I'm sorry, but can you help me? Instead of, hey, can you help me? Hey, can we just pair up? Would you mind reading this? I probably said I'm sorry 10 times in the first 2 minutes of my conversation. And then I thanked him a ton for being helpful. Even though he talked to me like I was a small child, I was so grateful he helped me and read that handout for me. We shouldn't have to apologize for needing assistance. We all need assistance at different times in our life for many different reasons, and disability is just one of them. And so, but it's that internalize what we have gotten from all of this experience. Anybody, any questions or thoughts for me? Comments? Examples of any of the levels? Usually I'd break up here and do an activity. and have people give me examples, but due to time, I'm not going to do a full breakout. But I do have time. I do leave enough time. If anybody wants to share any examples of any area of ableism that they have seen or experienced. Like the parking was a great example.
This is Tyler. It looks like Joseph has a hand raised.
Yeah, Joseph.
Yeah, I spent a lot of years in IEP meetings, and I used to hate it when it was tedious and also disturbing. A lot of my IEP meetings always started with all the things my son couldn't do, or I should say, all the things my sons couldn't do. Both of my sons are on IEPs, and it got to the point where I said, could you please start these meetings focusing on things that he can do? And it's finally, both of my sons are out of school now, and but it was very challenging to go to those IEP meetings and just listen to all of the things, all these people telling me about all the things he could not do and how he was not normal. And I had enough of it. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I stopped the meeting and I was like, so now what we're going to do is you're going to tell me the things that he can do and how he does stand out and how he does make a positive contribution to your class. It's been a long road,
Yeah. Yes, those IEP meetings. Thank you for that example.
This is Tyler, and it also looks like Barbara has a hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something positive, because I know that the frustrations are a lot, and people go through a lot. I'm learning a lot and hearing a lot of things that, unfortunately, I've been familiar with a sister who had learning disabilities growing up, and my watching my mom struggle with trying to get the schools to work with her, and things have come a long way, but there's still a long way to go. And on a personal note, while I've always been an advocate, up until the last 2 years, when I had an illness that has now created mobility issues for me returning to work, I see it through a personal lens now that I had not had before, and have been so pleased with how my employer has really risen to the occasion.
Good.
And made things not only better for me, but that in turn makes it better for everyone. And while we can't do everything, when I tell people about the things that have occurred over the last year, for me with regards to parking, making the bathrooms more accessible, some door entrances more accessible, and just the overall awareness on campus, and our facilities area looking at, giving more prioritization to fixing sidewalk entrances.
Good.
And things like that. It's been incredible to see. So from my personal experience, I feel very hopeful that that can be more people's experience, as the conversations are being had and people are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, definitely agree. Thank you.
Mm.
And I'm glad to hear that. I think October is Disability and Employment Month. And actually Tyler and Max just wrapped up the series at 3:00 today. But we did a lot of conversations, and we're finding more and more businesses are reaching out to us and saying, we have hired or we are hiring people with disabilities, and how do we make that better? So I'm going to pause for this chat too.
This is Tyler. Thank you. In the chat, Erica wrote, I appreciate your comments about job descriptions and job postings. Can you recommend a resource that colleges can use to ensure that they are avoiding the issues that you have described?
Yeah, this is Miranda. I think I'm trying to think of what handout. Did I provide a resource handout? I did. So I did provide one of the handouts is blogs, websites, and other ways to stay connected online. So I would check out those resources. I do have some additional resources. Job Accommodation Network, JAN, is a great resource about job accommodations and how hiring people with disabilities and that accommodation process. So I check out JAN. I'm happy to share. I have lots of resources when it comes to jobs and stuff like that. If you could send me an email, it's the best way that works for me and my disability. If you send me an email and just be like, hey, Miranda, can you send me employment resources? Then I can hit reply and send all of those resources over to you. That's the best way for me to get you additional resources. And then you can share widely. All of my resources, please share. Hopefully that helps. Any other questions or thoughts for me? Okay, just getting my notes cut up. This is where I skip a whole big, huge sections. We're going to fast forward 2 hours in the world of this presentation. We are offering, Tyler, would you be able to put a link in the chat to our November schedule?
This is Tyler. Yep, having a delay on my computer, but yes, I can do that.
Okay. Yeah, so in November, we are offering Abelism 101 and a 102. It's free and open to anybody. Registration is still open. And Tyler will be putting a link on there. And if you can't come to November, we will be doing it again in February. Those dates are not public yet, but we offer them a lot. So if you are like, hey, I need this full training, or if you want to do 102, you can. You've learned the basics for 101, and so you can skip to 102 if you would like to do that in the future. And I caught Tyler off of that request, so I know he's working on it. Okay, so we're going to wrap up our afternoon together with language. When we talk about ableism, it can be hard, depending, we're all on different spots in our journey, and that's okay. It is truly a journey, and we all need to just keep working, learning, and growing. And language is one of them. When I leave a presentation, I'm happy to learn, but I'm an action person. Like, I need to do something now. Ableism is yucky. I don't like it. How do I start making this world better? And we can all do that with our language. Language is powerful. We can build a person up and we can tear them down with just our language. You know, when we're having a disagreement with somebody, we can pick our words very precisely to make that point. And so when we talk about language, it's important to remember that disability is natural. Disability is considered diversity. And disability is a minority group. And with every minority group in history, those groups have got to decide the language that best fits them. It's not for the non-disabled community to decide that. It is for us. And there is a huge movement. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tyler. He put a link to November 101 and November for 102. So you are welcome to join both. Tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell a stranger. We still have openings in both of those. And so it's really important that disability is natural. But as a culture and a society, I know that's not how it's viewed. And that is revealed in the language. People will talk about disability and how it can't do. We talk about disability as a deficit, and it is not. We don't talk about other minority groups in that deficit mindset, so we shouldn't do disability either. And so thinking about this, today I'm going to focus on disability and using neutral language. If you were to do, when you do Ableism 102 with us, I will go into more depth on language and talk about person first and identity first. But for today, I don't. But I do want to acknowledge that. If some of you, because it sounds like we have some advanced learners, might be like, ooh, what about identity first or person first? The simple answer is both are correct and you can use both. And if you want to learn more, come hang out with Tyler and I in 102. But today, always, no matter what situation, neutral language always works. So I'm going to start with the basics there. Disability is natural, and so our language around disability needs to be natural as well. However, usually when we're talking about disability, the beginning of the conversation starts with what's wrong with them. What's wrong with her? What's wrong with him? What's wrong with you? We make this assumption that there must be something wrong with you. If you have a disability, that baseline assumption is that there's something's wrong with you. And there is not. There is nothing wrong with anyone with a disability. And so we need to just stop using that word wrong. Use the word disability. Disability is neutral. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act. People with disabilities named that. There's disability history, disability culture. It's disability. You can simply ask when it's appropriate, what is your disability? Most of the time what works is, how can I help you? Because does it really matter what the disability is? If you just want to help, you want to help. So ask, how can I help you? Doesn't matter what my disability is. Does that change anything? You might need to. You might be doing an intake form. You might be doing a job accommodation or accommodation for a student. There are times where you might need to know what a disability is, so ask that. But if it doesn't matter, then don't ask what the disability is.
This is Tyler. Also in the chat, Joseph wrote, and let's end the R word.
Yes, yes. We have a whole video on let's end the R word. If you don't know what the R word is, ask Google or email me, because I'm not going to say it on air. We're being recorded. Another one, then once somebody tells you what their disability is, people's usual response is, oh, that's so sad, or, ooh, I'm so sorry about that. There's nothing to be sad or sorry about. Having a disability isn't always, great, but being human isn't always great either. And you can say, oh, I'm sorry I didn't provide that accommodation. I'm sorry that you're in a lot of pain today. That is fine. But to always respond with that sad or that sorry, that again, it reinforces that idea that it's not okay to be me. And that's not true. And then can't. Joseph brought this up with, talking about his sons. And can't. We talk about people with disabilities and their deficits and what they can't do. Miranda can't read. Tyler can't blink. Can't. We all have things we cannot do, with or without a disability. We don't talk about our non-disabled peers and things that they can't do. We don't hold meetings to talk about everything that person can't do. So why do that for people with disabilities? I have been introduced as the presenter who can't read. I always get nervous when people say, oh, let me do an introduction. I'm always like, no, please let me. No idea how you're going to introduce me. That scares me. People have added in many conversations. And so don't focus on what a person can't do. You can say, oh, Miranda's going to need some assistance with reading. Oh, you know what? We have a job. We have an accommodation. We have a student who's going to need some assistance with reading in this classroom. And so usually just say what you mean. Focus on the neutral part of that. Another one we hear a lot is special needs. I know this comes from special education in our K through 12 system, and the system is called that. It needs to be fixed, but it hasn't yet. So you can call the system that. But people are not special. Our needs are not special. Our needs are our civil right. They're an accommodation. Students have accommodations in school. Just like employees have accommodations at work. And so we need to be using the word accommodation. It's not special accommodation. Just because I use a screen reader at work and school doesn't, and you don't, that doesn't make it special. It just means it's my right. I have a civil right to those accommodations. And so just refer to it as an accommodation. A really common one too is high and low functioning, especially in the autistic community. And people aren't high and low functioning. They're value terms. There's 17 of us on here right now. And if I were to ask all of us to make a list of high functioning values in our coworkers and then low value functioning, we're going to have 17 different lists because we all value different traits in people. So instead, say what you mean. When you ever catch yourself wanting to use high or low functioning, truly just say what you mean. People will label me. I've heard people, oh, Miranda's a high functioning LD. I don't have a clue what that means. It tells you nothing about me, right? If I was going to be in your English class, I'm going to need some accommodations to meet the needs of that English class. However, if this was a math class or somebody in here teaches art, I'm not going to need any accommodations probably. And so then the label doesn't even make sense. So say what you mean is truly how we do need that. Another one is the word impaired, hearing impaired and visually impaired. Impaired isn't neutral. How many of you would like to be known as the impaired coworker? Yeah, nope, not neutral, nothing that we want. It can be blind or low vision, or deaf or hard of hearing. If you don't know, most of the time you don't need to know what the clinical definition is. You can just say, people can decide. I do have a friend who is technically legally blind. I only know that because I asked her. However, she refers to herself as low vision. So that's how I do it. I asked, hey, Leatrice, do you prefer blind or low vision? She actually said, well, I prefer Leatrice. And I was like, fair. But if I need to include your disability, what would you prefer? And she says, I actually prefer low vision. Perfect. That's what I prefer. That's her choice. Now, does she have to put that she's legally blind when she's applying for a service? Yes, that's between her and that paperwork. But generally, we don't need to get that in depth. Deaf of hard of hearing, blind or low vision. Don't use the word impaired regarded any person there. Any questions or thoughts for me? Okay, so just a couple more things. This is usually where I do a quiz. However, because of time, I gave you all the answers for the quiz today because I want you to have access to this. I want you to leave with the information you need. But I want to cover a few more things just in case if you have a few more questions, you might not be brave enough to ask them. Some of you might be thinking about some other things. So here are some common things that we get about language and going a little bit more depth into them. So on the left-hand side of this table is words and phrases that we hear quite a bit with that negative view about disability. And then on the left-hand side is words and phrases to model that more neutral language. How do we change language? It's by using the correct language ourselves. And over time, people around us are going to model that neutral language. They probably won't even know why they're doing it, but you'll influence them by you using that neutral language. People with disabilities, we learn the same language because we hear what's around us. When we have heard nothing but negative and judgmental terms used about us our whole life, we're going to do that too. But when you start modeling and using neutral language, others around you will follow suit. So the first one then is handicapped person or differently abled person. It's just a person with a disability or disabled person. Both are correct and both are neutral. Remember, use the word disability. There's nothing wrong with the word disability. Handicap is considered actually old and outdated. And when you really dig deep into the word handicap, it's actually a term back in Romans times related to sports. It was never meant to be applied to people when you look at that root of that word. And so let's not use it anymore. And differently abled, when we go back to the very beginning of this presentation, when you think of differently abled, a lot of times people think of how your body moves, and that's not what disability is. Disability is bigger than that. So let's just use the word disability. And so some of you might be thinking, okay, Miranda, I'm following you. But what do I call those handicap bathrooms and that handicap parking? Because that's how we usually all know it as. It's actually accessible parking and accessible bathrooms. Here in the state of Michigan, we did change that back in 2021. It is now officially that. Signs take time, and when the law is passed, it takes time to get those things. Signs are built, like in all of your school parking lots. They were put up probably years ago, and they stay until they start rusting, or the snowplow takes them out, or a bathroom is remodeled. And so it will take time to get signs replaced. But if you are a person that does that, make sure that those signs are updated when you can. It's accessible parking or an accessible bathroom. It's a design feature. Lets people with disabilities know that they can use that space. Another one is able-bodied person or normal person. That would then just be a person without a disability or non-disabled person. Both of them work. Again, just because you don't have a disability doesn't make you normal. I've met lots of people without disabilities. None of you are normal. And able-bodied, again, is referring to how your body moves, and that doesn't really make sense when you really think about that definition of a disability. This one here is wheelchair-bound or confined to a wheelchair. And I'm going to let Tyler explain this one.
Thank you, Miranda. And this is Tyler. Yeah, so words and phrases that have showed a negative view and that I personally, as someone who has been a wheelchair user my entire life, have heard. People will tend to use wheelchair bound or confined to a wheelchair to describe somebody who is using a wheelchair. And I can just tell you that that is not the case for me and for many people that I know. Wheelchairs are actually liberating and freeing and allow us to move within the community in ways that we otherwise wouldn't. And so it certainly is not bounding or confining. And so I prefer, and what's here also, and what many prefer, is to be a wheelchair user or uses a wheelchair. That's both in identity and person first. And I will just share that there was a moment in my life where I didn't have access to insurance and didn't have a chair. And I would argue that those were actually the bounding and confining moments of my life. And it wasn't until I was able to get access to my chair and be able to re-enter the community and do the things that I enjoy, that it brings a lot of freedom. So it's actually quite the opposite.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler, for that example.
Mhm.
The next one is that's crazy or that's insane. There could be a few different options, and this comes from the mental health community. Crazy isn't neutral anymore. It's the crazy gunman, it's the crazy person. Crazy isn't good. Usually when we're using the word crazy, it's because something isn't good. It's not how we like it. And so the people with mental health disabilities are asking us to refrain from using that. Crazy could also historically put somebody in jail or an institution. You could be deemed crazy and locked away with no proof or information behind that. And so there's lots of different examples. And so that's wild, wow, unbelievable, no way. I've called somebody a liar before. They were telling me a story about something that happened to them, and I was like, you have to be lying to me. Please tell me that did not happen here in 2023. And they're like, yep. And so crazy might not be something to you that's like, you might be like, oh, whatever, that's not a big deal. That might be okay for you, but you don't know everybody's lived experience and what that word may mean. So it's honoring that group of people and what they say and working to not use that. I know personally that's my hardest one that I'm still working on. I've probably been teaching that part now for the past 7-8 years, and this is the one I catch myself on and having to rework because it's used so much in our community as a society, but we really need to work on not using that. Special accommodations. Again, people are like, oh, I like the word accommodations. That makes sense, Miranda, but they leave the word special in front of it. Accommodations are not special. Accommodations are a civil right. And so just use the word accommodations. And my last example for today is the word disability, but disability is spelled lowercase dis, uppercase ability. Ability. And it's just disability. And people say, well, I don't want to focus on the disability. Isn't dis bad, disability? No. It's disability history, culture, and pride. There is nothing wrong with having a disability. There's nothing wrong with the word disability. And so let's just use the word disability.
This is Tyler. It does look like in the chat, Joseph provided another link for a Sue Austin deep sea diving in a wheelchair TED Talk. Thank you very much for that, Joseph.
Yeah, thank you. I'll check that one out. That sounds like a new one for me. And I've left time here. Anybody have any questions or thoughts on language? I did provide a handout of language guidelines, kind of summarizing everything just to leave. It's a lot of information. Sometimes language is new for people. And so just to have an additional handout and thought later, that handout's available. So just then to keep in mind about language, after I give a language presentation, sometimes these are all direct quotes that people have said to me over my time here at Disability Network. Miranda, people are too sensitive. It's all about political correctness. It changes all the time. I cannot keep up. It's not like I'm trying to offend someone. What's the big deal? Or the newest one, Americans, you're just getting soft. Language isn't about any of these things. Language is about valuing a group of people and our history and our culture and our language. Just like other minority groups here that all get to set their language, we get to do that the same as individuals and people with disabilities. We get to decide those things. It's not about being sensitive or political correctness. And guess what? It does change. Language changes. Webster Dictionary updates often to keep up with the change in language. So disability gets to do the same thing. We get to change and evolve in time like every other group. And so, yeah, it is. Ask questions, keep learning, ask Google. You can't offend Google, so ask Google. It is offensive. People have offended me by the things and the way that they have spoken to me, talked to me, with me, and about me and around me. Language is powerful and it is a big deal. And I actually don't think we're getting soft at all. I think finally, as Americans, we are starting to value each other and our lived experiences and our culture. And I think we're actually getting better. Better doesn't mean soft. Better is good in this case. And so I thank everybody for working that are trying to make language. And I know it's a change. You're not going to get it right all the time. That's okay. I mess up too. And it's about correcting yourself and moving on and being okay with it. The image on this screen is of a person's face super close to the camera, their hands out like a really big face nose. That's what I think of when people say to me, yeah, but Miranda. This is the image that comes to my mind. That's my humor that I have in my brain. And so remember, language isn't about any of those things. My last slide here is just my contact information. It says questions, comments, has our website if you want to check out Disability Network. And we have some good resources on our website as well. And our logo. Any questions? I left time at the end because I wasn't sure how many questions people. I want to make sure we have time for those.
This is Tyler in the chat. Joseph wrote, thanks for presenting.
Yeah, thanks also for participating, Joseph. I love participation. There's nothing worse than when nobody participates. So I like that people came to participate. I'm going to quit screen sharing. Now I can see everybody.
If I had some sound effects, I would do the round of applause. This is Precious speaking. Thank you so much, Miranda and Tyler, for the time that you shared with us today and really sharing ways that we can implement these strategies as soon as we hit end on our call today. I know that I learned quite a bit and am looking to actively change my language. So thank you so much for your presentation. I will be sharing the materials out after today just to make sure everyone has them, along with the recording once we're able to upload it onto our website. Thank you again. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
And this is Miranda. I'll stick on too, just in case if somebody wants a question with a smaller group.
Sure, thanks.
And would it be okay if we stop recording? So if somebody doesn't want their question recorded,